Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalina. Let's talk leadership. Hey, welcome to today. I'm going to do my best to share about a concept that I think I've shared about a little bit in the past. It's a tough one. Today marks the anniversary of a really difficult day for me. Was delivering my daughter who died within me. And even saying that out loud is like, what? You know, death is such a necessary part of life, and I'm going to really do my best to not just speak platitudes like that. And I think I have a good means of exploration because I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole with the Black Madonna of Einsiedel or Maria Bistrica out of Croatia. It's the Black Madonna, essentially, which is this embodiment of the Virgin Mary, but she's completely black and she's holding her child, which is, of course, Jesus. And there are other goddesses that I'd like to get into as well. So this isn't just a Christian phenomenon by any means. There's Kali and Isis. And the reason I'd like to delve into this world of these goddesses is to explain a concept that I think we've lost a lot in Western society. I think that in this book, and we're going to be going through the Black Madonna of Einsiedel by Fred Gustafsson as the primary reference. So if you're interested, I have it here if you're watching on video. So we'll go through it. Why are we going to go through it? Well, or why do I feel that it's important? Well, in the depths of my own despair and difficulty this time last year, I really didn't know where to turn. And I found myself going back to what my family knows. And I learned to pray the rosary from my grandmother, who actually also recently passed away. And there's this comfort that comes from, I think, tradition and the known that is very masculine. It's conscious. So maybe we take it back. Carl Jung, we did an exploration of one of his works in previous episodes. He has spoken a lot about the Black Madonna, or the feminine, the representation of the feminine within Christianity, at the very least, being the fourth element that he has deemed to be missing with the Trinity, which is the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And his thought is that we leave out the feminine a lot in society today in favor of the masculine. What is the masculine? The masculine is logos. The masculine is known. The masculine is the light. The masculine is logical and reasonable. It's facts. And the discussion here is that while all of that is good, we need balance, because you can't have the pursuit of knowledge without the unknown. If you knew everything, you wouldn't have the pursuit of knowledge. Why should we care about the pursuit of knowledge? Well, if we're valorizing science and we're valorizing education, learning, then there has to be stuff that's not known, or else, well, what would you need to learn, or what would you need to research in science? I mean, we research things in science because there are things we don't know yet. There are facts, principles. I mean, whether you take this at the individual level, that you as a person have things you know and don't know, or you take this as a collective where society, there are things that we know as a society and things that we don't know. And this whole argumentation is around, well, we need the unknown to have the known. We need both sides. And so that's as simple as I could put it if I wanted to encapsulate it in all of 30 seconds is, look, we've got masculine, feminine, light and darkness. Venus and Mars, logos and eros, conscious and unconscious, known and unknown. It's this duality. It's yin and yang. It's this duality that has stood the test of time across multiple societies, religions, philosophies, and philosophers. You know, it's this very basic principle that hangs in the balance. And why does this matter when it comes to the anniversary of such a difficult day for me? Well, because I think looking at death, not in a morbid way, but looking at death is what has allowed me to consider what it means to live. It's the comparison of the opposite that has allowed me to examine being alive. And there's a really important episode coming out soon with Robert Greene that I hope you'll tune into, where we discuss more of this. And he's researching this extensively, and I think is doing a brilliant job, which will come out in his next book. My side of this research, or where I have gone down the rabbit hole, and I don't know all the ins and outs of what he's writing about exactly, but I think we had a fruitful discussion. And again, we'll share that soon and hope that you'll listen to it. But my investigation of this so far is on the side of the unknown, of the unconscious, of this idea of eros, of femininity, and what it means. The unknown and unconscious mind being creative, earthy, dark. It's destruction in order to have birth. It's death and resurrection. You can't have resurrection without death. You can't have birth without death of some sort. I've been reading a book about just different women's stories through their lives, and they touch on motherhood, and it's just interesting. Not a single mother that I know or have read about will say that they feel the same after they become a mother. And that's a whole other principle in and of itself when we talk about going from maiden to woman to mother, right? We go through this transformation and then into this wise woman, wise elder type of matriarch, which is something else that from the feminine trajectory we've abandoned a lot, that wisdom of the wise elderly woman. And we see that obviously in society's attempt to not age or not show age or to stay forever young. It's this rejection of the aging and the wisdom that comes through age and through experience. And so similarly, there's sometimes this rejection of the mother and rejection of, well, our own femininity, and trying to, of course, fit into the known, the logos, the reason. And there's nothing wrong with reason, but as a society, again, I think we're on this bent toward the known, the certain. And I think a lot can be found under the surface. And certainly in the past year, in my own pursuit of knowledge, understanding, healing from my own personal experience, I've realized that I needed the experience in order to heal. I needed the experience in order to go down this rabbit hole. Without the experience of death within my own body and the pain and suffering, I would not have birthed this new insight. I wouldn't be who I am today. And a lot of people say that, right? They say, oh, I am who I am because of my struggles, and it feels really cheap sometimes. It's like, yeah, really? Are you sure? Or what? How? People say, like, I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone. And at the same time, I know that there's this, the only way I could have found the Black Madonna, the only way I could have found these insights about delving into the unconscious mind, of looking at my femininity and supporting my clients to do the same, the shadow self as well. The only way that I would have gone down this rabbit hole, I think, or at least based on what I know so far, is because of the absolute pain I faced. And let's get into the book, I suppose. So he speaks to the self is born from the unconscious. The woman is the bearer of light from darkness. Parents are a union into the child, which reconciles the two. So what are we saying here? Well, your core self is born out of the unconscious, similar to how a child is born from the darkness of a womb into the light. It's this idea of birthing creative thoughts, birthing humans. It's this idea of creativity. And so women are creators of life through the womb, similar to how ideas are formed in the darkness. It's why a lot of creators do create in isolation, and or it's kind of this cave, dark retreat kind of idea where we refine like a butterfly, a caterpillar in a cocoon, in the darkness of the cocoon, and then comes out into the transformed butterfly. Similar, I mean, we've got Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey. You've got to go through the trials and tribulations of life to come out the other side renewed and well, evolved. The idea is that there's no other way. Now you could argue and say, well, what do you mean? You can't learn from good experiences? Why? What? Why does it have to be pain and suffering that sharpens you into somebody new? I think you can absolutely learn from good experience, and the goodness is absolutely part of this equation. And that's the whole thing, is I think people, it's like, oh, why are we focused on death and suffering? And why does it have to exist? And if there was a God, why would there be suffering? But it's like, there has to be suffering in order to be a God. There has to be darkness in order to have light. You have to have the contrast. It's almost, I think it's just this deep principle. Like, I mean, we have, so it's also sun and moon is another way to conceptualize it. I mean, how can you have the day if you don't have night? It's perpetual day. You wouldn't have a distinction. There would be no word for it, if that makes sense. Like, if there's no distinction, then, well, it's only one thing. And if it's only one thing, then it's, how can you describe it? We describe things in relation to other things in a sense, right? Or else there's no, like, something is green because it's not brown, or it's not red, or it's not yellow. It's like everything has to hold its own specific place. That's the order. That is that masculine known, is everything has its place. And so even with my coaching clients, a lot of people are really focused on the known. They're focused on their goals and their plans. But then what happens when you have setbacks and drop, these things that happen that burn your whole idea to the ground, or, things that are unanticipated that just come to you? I mean, those are the unexpected, unplanned elements that always exist, no matter how well you've laid your plans, no matter how many resources you've dedicated to making the perfect budget or timeline. It is never, ever the case that every single little piece goes exactly as you thought it would. And that's the same thing with creation. It's the same thing with having a child. It's the eyes of the mother and the lips of the father, or the ears of the father. It's this kind of toss up. It's this Russian roulette of the universe, where part of it will work out as you planned, and then part of it won't. And that statement I mentioned with the parents are a union into the child, which reconciles the two. The idea is that you take these two forces, you take the unconscious and the conscious, the masculine and the feminine, you put them together. And what's birthed by putting together the conscious and the unconscious is the child, is this new awareness, is this new level of spiritual understanding, which reconciles the two, the masculine and the feminine, or the conscious and unconscious. So this child, similar to how we're saying could have the ears of the father and the eyes of the mother, or vice versa, it's the perfect mixture of mother and father into this new being. And that symbolic representation of mother, father into child is the same idea as known and unknown into new awareness. You take what's unknown, this black box or big ocean, dark ocean, where there's so much below the surface that you can't see, and things bubble up from the depths of the sea into your consciousness to the top, right? They rise to the top and they come into your awareness. Jung's work is focused very much so on dreams, of course. And so we get that awareness out of our dreams. Our dreams are these unconscious messages kind of coming to consciousness, and we need to understand them, the symbolic nature of them, in order to understand where our unconscious mind might be guiding us. And so that's the whole kind of, well, my understanding of the whole premise of Jungian analysis is this process of individuation, which is, I suppose, this reconciling of, well, the known and unknown to understand the core self. The core self comes from the unconscious. It comes from, that's sort of why, like, whenever I talk with my mom about this, and I think she thinks, well, I don't know what she thinks, but like when we chat, it always seems that she sees me as this adversary because I'm in the coaching field, and in coaching, it is very known logos. It's action plan. It's step by step. It's what are your goals? It's what are we working on? Where are you today? Where do you want to be? And her work is very much so on the eros side of the equation. It's unknown. It's irrational. It's out of the depths. It's soul work. It's the stuff that you can't put on a timeline, and there is no end point necessarily other than deep understanding in this individuation process. And so she looks at me and she says, well, you want goals and timelines and neat little boxes, but this is not what this process is. And I mean, I totally understand that. I think for me, I love that coaching can be that known logos, the rational, the game plan. That's always appealed to me. I've loved rational thought. I've loved control and order. I like, that things can be in their place. At the same time, I've come to see how my coaching of my clients and the way that I approach my life over the past year has absolutely blossomed and changed in a way that has been so difficult. I can't even express to you how hard of a year I've had personally. Absolutely the most challenging year of my life, hands down, maybe even the past few years, but certainly this past year, no question, has been door to door, like August 21st to August 21st, the hardest year of my life in a lot of ways. And I'll tell you that it's absolutely been a necessary part of my growth and maturity. And that's what this book echoes. Page 57, talks about needing destruction, darkness, death to produce life and light. You have to burn something to its ashes for change to take place. And it's this idea of my old self had to be destroyed. Not because I chose it. Honestly, I didn't choose that. I didn't want it to be this way. I didn't want it to occur the way it did, but it didn't matter what I wanted. It was about what I needed. And so if you're facing anything in your life where you feel like, why me? Why me? It's very easy to go into this victim mode. Believe me, I get it. But I think you can change that and say, okay, why me? What is this doing for me? It's a why me with a different bent or a different slant on it. It's why me? Why do I need this right now? What is this showing me? And I think if you can go and look toward it, another really interesting quote, which I really liked, was page 107 of this book. They're talking about Kali, which is a Hindu goddess, also about creativity and destruction. She's absolutely this powerful force. I actually studied Kali when I was doing my yoga teacher training. And I was into my pursuit of knowledge around Hinduism and the life principles there. And I will say Kali is just this absolute strong badass of a woman with skulls of her conquests, if you will. And people could see that and say, wow, that's so harsh. That's so brutal or not feminine at all. It's vulgar. It's dark, but it is dark, and darkness is feminine. And this is, if you think of it, it's like a box with 4 quadrants. Okay. And you've got like the virginal Mother Mary, this like pure femininity, that pristine, pure virginal idea that we see. And then you have the masculine, like the prince or the knight, that good masculine, right? The dependable, logical, strong man, and that virginal woman representation. But then you have these 2 others, right? And you have that kind of villain, the evil masculine, that villain counterpart, the one in all the movies that is that, let's say, bottom right quadrant, or that dark masculine, if you will. And then you have the dark feminine. You have the feminine of Kali, of the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna is literally just the Virgin Mary, but black in face and skin and body. The child is also black in that representation. And Kali is also very black as a goddess. Isis is literally the same representation. She's holding her child and she's black and the child is black. It's almost identical. The story's a bit different, but it's almost identical to the Black Madonna is Isis. And so you see that dark feminine. Why do we need that? Well, exactly why I said we need known and unknown. We need the light and the darkness within the representation of masculine and feminine. So, why would we possibly need this woman that seems brutal and almost gross, like you don't want to look at it? Well, why do we need that? Well, I saw a fly or this insect get, that died on the driveway today. And right away, you've got ants piling up on top of it, eating it away. Well, what's going on? Why in forests does a tree fall and die? And then there's moss and fungi and animals, little insects eating up the tree. Okay, Kalina, obviously, circle of life. Yeah, we get it. Yeah, I know we get it. We get it to the point that we don't acknowledge it or we don't consciously think about it because it's so deeply ingrained. We just know it. Well, but do you know it? Have you really looked death in the eye and your own mortality? So the fact that you will die, but also the parts of you that have to die. We look at the shadow self as well. And this has, again, this type of work has really changed the way that I coach individuals, no questions asked. And this has been over the past year for sure, which is, what are you not looking at? What is the untapped potential? Your untapped potential comes from the unconscious because it's untapped because you don't see it. So there's another exercise I do with clients a lot. And I learned it from a mastering coaching training that I am enrolled in that I think is just has come at the perfect time in my life as well. Everything seems to, timing is just no joke. And actually Kali is the goddess of time. And so the time that gives and takes away, it's this idea of, again, creation and destruction, but of time, right? Like it can give and take time, give and take life. Life is time in a sense, like you have a certain amount of time in your life and you choose how to use it. And it's all sort of relative, and we could go into really deep philosophical ideas. But anyhow, the Johari window is something I use with clients, and it's essentially to understand what your untapped potential, that quality is. And so we'll use a word and we'll look at what it is in excess, extreme, that quality that you want. What is it in extreme? And then that extreme, we look at the positive opposite. So what's the opposite of that extreme, but that is in a positive light, that's in a useful light? And that is the untapped potential, is to tap into the part of you that you feel. So for example, some people want to be productive, right? But when they want to be productive and they're too focused on that, they become very controlling. They become workaholics. Maybe they work too much. Okay, what's the opposite of working too much? Well, not working at all. But what's the positive of not working at all? Well, perhaps it's calm or relaxation, or being stagnant can be perceived as bad, but perhaps it's like reflection. If you're at a standstill, you can look around and see what's available to you. And so somebody that wants to be productive in that particular example, their untapped potential, the shadow, the unconscious part of themselves, is this calm or reflection. And so for them to be the most productive, they should go and reflect. And so it's this, every single client that I've chatted with, that we go through this, and whatever quality it is that they want, time and time again, no questions asked, that untapped potential. It's like, yeah, I need some of that. I had one client, it was like to become an educator or teacher versus the tendency to babysit, right? And so it sounds like just words. Okay, educator or teacher versus babysitter, what's the difference? Well, everything, right? Because if you're approaching the people that you manage as a babysitter, you're obviously approaching them very differently from if you see them as a teacher, or if you're showing up in that facilitator type of role. Extremely different from being a babysitter, right? And so everything in that exercise, of course, has to do with your own perception or your own perspective, because you get to decide how to bring to life being a teacher or being calm or reflective. But what it's trying to do is shed some light in a very quick way on parts of you that perhaps are unconscious, are not seen, or not known by you. And often we avoid our shadow. I had another client who represented their shadow. I mean, I've had clients that represent them in a bunch of ways. Some people see it as their younger self. Some picture, I had one client say, yeah, it's this picture of me when I was in college. It's that. Other people say it reminds them of like Dobby or Gollum, these movie characters, right? It looks really dark and small, or sometimes it can be a monster. But your shadow self, that exploration into your shadow, while it could be scary, and this is, I think, the whole point of this entire thing is to look at that uncomfortable unknown in the eye and go toward it. Because if you just stay in the known, there's no growth there. And if you think that you're safe, that's the funny thing. In the known, you think that you're safe with reason and rationale and having all the rules and all the structure. You think you're safe, except there will always be something to come in that'll knock you off your course. And what are you going to do then? Like, what are you going to do when all of your best laid plans, they don't go exactly to plan? What are you going to do? You've got to be able to be adaptable to the things that show up along your path. And that's exactly what, I mean, listen, I'm just preaching to myself here. Like, I'm not here to tell anybody what to do or that I've got this figured out by any means, because this is exactly what I need to tell myself and remind myself of is, hey, I would love to control things and have them work out the way that I want them to. But guess what? They don't. That's a fact of life. They don't. And so how are you going to navigate that darkness? How are you going to navigate the unknown? How are you on your little boat on this ocean going to navigate all the scary monsters underneath the surface? Are you going to pretend they don't exist? That's one option. But then they can come up and swallow you whole. And when they do, you're going to be completely out of sorts and unprepared. Like me last year, really, in the past few years, like, it's not just last year, it's like, I thought I had this level of control that I really don't. And there's so much that's outside of our control and knowledge. And that's one reason I love coaching, is coaching focuses very strongly on what's in your control, because there is so little, but of what little there is to control, my hope is to help people to control it, which is the thoughts that they have all day long. How are they talking to themselves? What is their internal dialogue? And what actions are they taking? What are you doing with your small sphere of influence of your will? How are you choosing to go about your day? How are you choosing to treat other people? How are you responding to people in situations? That's it. And yeah, you'll mess it up, and great, because you're human, right? But that's exactly the point. Is sometimes relationships end and need to decay and deconstruct or have space in order to be rebuilt again, or for new relationships to come in their place. I just had a friend that everything in her life came crashing down. It was just like roommate, friendships, relationship, like everything was ending at the same time. And so that's Murphy's Law, right? What can go wrong will go wrong. Why is that? Well, why is that? Because all of that destruction, and all of that death, the burning down of her life was necessary. And we see it, right? I mean, have you seen it for yourself? Have you seen people in your life? Things just come crashing down. It happened with my car accident. Things came crashing down around me to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And sometimes it has to be that way. And hopefully, you can be exploring and examining this darkness, this shadow, the parts of you that scare you or feel shameful or unworthy. If you can explore them before everything has to go crashing down, good for you. You're better off than I was. But we're all seeking this peace that comes from this feeling of wholeness. Everything is good. A lot of cultures will speak to the wholeness in Jung is the individuation. You bring together all parts of yourself, but the cross, for example, signifies wholeness, but the wholeness that you must go the way of suffering and death to get to rebirth. That's like the Jesus just in 2 seconds. It's like you've got to go through the process of suffering and death in order to be reborn, resurrected. That's like exactly what Jesus on the cross represents. It's rebirth through suffering, redemption through suffering, through death of his body, but death of self, death. And your own cave or your own suffering is exactly that unconscious, that area where these insights are going to come to your life. So whatever the big struggle in your life is, and everybody has their lot, right? you have the things that you've struggled with, whether you struggled in school or with work, or you struggle in relationships with, or maybe with money, or maybe your health, you've had big health struggles. There's stuff in your story that you've struggled with uniquely to you that are absolutely the things that are going to support your evolution or growth, spiritually, psychologically, the psyche growth. I mean, it's this soul growth concept. But even if you have mixed feelings about soul, this is not meant to be necessarily a religious episode. It's about seeking to have a relationship with the part of you that's unconscious. And so Jung does it through dreams. Some people do it through prayer and relationship with God or gods or religion. And religion, church, organized religion, is different from this spiritual pursuit. I want to kind of uncouple this. I think it's just, we're so past this now. Like the argument that people don't believe in the church, it's like, aren't we past that by now? Aren't we past, like, you can choose. And if you don't like the church, you don't like the church, but you can choose where and how you want to go about this. But I think what's non-negotiable is that you have to go along this journey. So choose the forces, choose the representations, and how you want to talk about this, the influences. What I have found comfort in has to do with my background, my upbringing, and a tradition that I was raised with. And so that's what brings me a sense of comfort, is studying this in the context of thousands of years of stories like Horus and Isis, to Hinduism, which is also remarkably old, and stories like Kali or Brahma, and then stories in Christianity like the Black Madonna of Einsiedel or Maria Bistrica in Croatia. These stories that have stood the test of time, whether it's centuries or millennia, to me speak to how foundational they are to our human condition. And so if you don't want to, I think you can see this from a psychological, and I think you can see this from a spiritual, up to you. But I think just saying that you don't believe in the spiritual nature of things, you don't believe in the unknown, it's denying half of reality, in my opinion, because there are things that are unknown. There are things that are uncontrollable. There are things that are out of your purview, out of your conscious perception, that you're not aware of. And to say those things don't exist, I think limits you. I really do. So, and the limited me. The only reason I say that is not to judge you, but is to say they limited me to, the amount that I thought I knew things. I'm always shown that I really don't, and that my best bet is to become curious, open, receptive to information, people, ideas, research that I haven't seen yet, because that, me being open and receptive, that is what allows me to see things as they arise that I need to see. And so, I mean, where are we going with this? I can't say I have an exact agenda other than to really honor the fact that through the most difficult time in my life, I have learned so much. And I just hope that if you're in a difficult point in your life, you know that it's shaping you and that there's something to learn, even though it sucks in the moment. And, I had to tell myself every day that even though I was in physical pain, I was in emotional pain, I was grieving, that I could feel that I was different from the moment it occurred, 5 a.m, 8 a.m, being at the hospital for 24 hours in complete, my instinct was to say in complete hell. But you know what? It wasn't. In some ways, it was hellish, for sure. Like, no question about it. In some ways, it was exceptionally hellish. Whether it's, the hospital putting you in the same place, putting me in the same place as women birthing healthy children, just that is torture enough, I think, for anyone to endure. But in the moment within myself, this quotation really shines true, which is, well, let me read you the whole thing. I just highlighted a bit of it. And it's about Kali, which is, again, that Hindu goddess. And it's from Sri Ramakrishna in reply to a question regarding the blackness of Kali. Is Kali, my divine mother, of a black complexion? She appears black because she is viewed from a distance, but when intimately known, she is no longer so. The sky appears blue at a distance, but when you go near and take it in your hand, you find that it is colorless. And so the idea there, at least to me, is that it seems dark, it seems black, but when you're in it, when I was in the darkest, most difficult moment where I felt like I was in this isolated, alone, there was no one that could take me out of it. There's no one that could help me. No one could take that pain, suffering away. It was just me there in it. No medication could have removed. They could try, but no medication can remove what pain exists in losing a child. And in that moment, it wasn't dark. I felt closest to what people call God that I ever have in my entire life. And God is said to be the representation of everything good. So how could I have felt closest to that? They say, you know, the veil is thin in childbirth. What is that? What veil? Well, the veil between, I suppose, conscious and unconscious, or this spiritual veil. And so in my biggest trial to date of a delivery of a dead stillborn child, in that most harrowing experience, the depths of difficulty, I was closest to God. I was closest to that spiritual nature. I mean, and I've spoken to other mothers of children that are alive, and every single mother that I have spoken with in that moment of childbirth felt like the veil was thin, whatever that means, that this reality, and the interesting thing is with that is this feeling that you're transcending some physicality. The interesting thing, though, is that childbirth is such a primal, physical, earthy thing or experience, process. You know, the process of childbirth is such a primitive one. It's such a, I mean, we wouldn't be here as humans if we didn't procreate and replicate. And so this idea of childbirth is so primal in nature. And so what's interesting is the feminine, that eros, the creative, is earthy. Again, darkness, soil, like of the earth, of matter. And so how funny that to get exposed to this highest realm of awareness or spirituality or connection with God or universe, or this unity feeling of being one with everything, or however you want to explain this feeling of wholeness, you've got to go to the depths of darkness and matter, the depths of earthy or human experience. And so doesn't that make complete sense that when you're fully in this human experience that's so human, raw, real, it's not curated for Instagram, it's not perfect and manicured, it's this like, and that's what grief and death does, I think, is it brings you, like, even being at my grandmother's funeral and seeing and feeling, I mean, I was just so in the depths of grief, and it was this suffering moment. Like you have moments where you feel like you can moderate your emotion and you can be acceptable or follow the norms, right? But there are these moments of deep grief where it's just like there's no choice but to feel the weight of the grief that is present for you in your body from this difficult experience. And in that weight, I've never felt so human. Similarly, again, and I don't want to just romanticize suffering. It's like, okay, yes, there are moments of pure joy and bliss that give you that same connection to, wow, everything is so amazing and life is just such a miracle and so perfect. And that is the death of you as that maiden and into motherhood. When every mother that I've seen or spoken to sees their child, it's this from the depths of pain or of the difficulty of childbirth, out comes this miracle. of life, which is a joy. And so it's this, you know, the depths of the depths to the highs of the highs in life. Again, they seem inextricably linked somehow. So anyhow, if I continue to read, Heinrich Zimmer gives an interesting background of the dynamics of Kali's personality. The energy of life is both destructive and creative, and in fact, are one and the same process. Life feeds on life. In the end, every creature becomes food for another. The aging and dying generation is to be replaced by the younger. She gives to one and takes from another. That's what I was saying about Kali, right? Time. She takes from one and gives to another. And so, of course, we want to just live forever and not discuss or acknowledge the part where it means that the music stops and the story ends. But I think the fact the music stops and the story ends, I think the fact that we age and die, I think that concept gives us a lease on life and the urgency to live now, and the proper amount of reverence for the opportunity and privilege it is to be alive. If you know that you're going to die and you understand that you're going to die, you are going to take what you can out of this life and give all you can into this life. So it's not just about taking, but it's about giving. You're going to soak it all in terms of your experience, and you're going to give as much as you possibly can. And so I think also more of the reading I've done is around, you know, these women and motherhood, and exactly that. Women have children and then they want to improve the world because they want to leave it to a future generation. And so again, it's this, because you're going to leave behind something. And that's even in writing my book. People want to leave a legacy behind. Why? Well, part of it is egotistical, but why? Why does the ego want that? Well, because if your memory survives, if your tradition survives, then you are continuing on a legacy that was built on the shoulders of generations well beyond yourself. It's not about you. You might think it's about you, but it's not about you, because it's shoulders upon shoulders. You're standing on the shoulders of past generations. I have a client right now who's going through different family epochs and going through like the great grandparents, the grandparents, the parents, and then the client's generation. And so what's interesting to see is what my client is struggling with and reckoning with and working through. It's interesting to understand how his father's generation has shaped his generation, how his grandfather's generation shapes his father and him, how his great grandfather shapes, and what the expectations on the masculine, the expectations of the men in that family were. What were the expectations? How were emotions expressed? People, did they, you know, so many cultures used alcohol as a means, especially for men. Alcoholism was rampant, and it still is rampant in many family structures. What was it? Or was it kind and open and loving? What were the terms of being a man in the household that you grew up in, or being a woman? What were the terms of what was family? What was okay? What wasn't okay? We think that we're just this isolated person, right? That you're this individual person, and you do have to cultivate your individual sense of self. But if I've learned anything, I mean, the amount of comfort I've gained from a rosary that where I had not picked up. If you asked me 5 years ago if I was going to pick up a rosary, I would have just probably laughed at you and had no understanding of why I would even think to do that. Why would I bother to do that? I would not have seen the utility or have had a connection to it. But through this immense suffering that I've been through, and through the death of my grandmother, understanding, it's not even an understanding, a conscious understanding. It's like this in my bones feeling of comfort, because I can hear her voice praying to me. I can hear her voice praying to me when I pray. And I can hear, it gives me goosebumps praying, thinking, you know, like I feel connected to her. And so many practices. There's also like the Native American or indigenous population. Their practices are absolutely tied to connecting with the ancestors. And that's the idea, is that your dreams or these voices that speak to you, it's their essence connecting with you. And that's what the rosary gives to me. It might not be the rosary for you, and that's okay. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I think what I would say is this has been an immensely fruitful exploration for me. And so if you're looking to take your self-awareness, if you're looking to take your spiritual exploration, either starting it or take it further, if you're looking to psychologically understand yourself, if you find yourself looking at things based on the context, but not looking at them based on more than what is immediately apparent. In this book, oh, I love this part. Let me read it to you. Page 82. So it says, well, let's see, where can I start? Okay. In its own way, the spectacle at Einsiedeln captures a psychic spiritual experience. In her left arm, the Madonna holds the child, the reconciling third thing. We talked about this, right? The third thing is the creation of masculine and feminine into this new awareness. He is the new consciousness of mankind, yet he must go the way of his mother as well as of his father. In other words, he is born not only a child of the collective standards of the time, which for him and our own time have long been patriarchal. He is not just the child of the heritage of the collective with its consciously formulated insights, worldviews, and religious statements, as rich as they may be. He is also the child of the dark, uncertain side of life. His mother is the uncanny, ambiguous, indecisive, yet fascinating side of the psyche that comes with a wisdom of its own and shakes the individual into a clear understanding that there is more to life than what is immediately apparent. And so this is what happens when we analyze dreams. This is what happens when a client comes to me and says, here's the situation. Here's what happened. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Well, there's more to every situation than what is immediately apparent. There's more to the situation than the core facts, right? Yes, of course. That when you look at a situation in a different way, you see more is revealed to you. You get a different perspective. You have more understanding. Same. I mean, this is the exact idea. What you first see is never the whole picture. And so the idea is that unconscious darkness, the uncertainty, when you look at it, when you're willing to look at it, the whole idea is that that is what will give you more understanding. So shakes the individual into a clear understanding that there's more to life than what is immediately apparent. So even if you just take that from this and say, there's more to life than everything I think I know, let me go and explore the darkness, the things that I haven't shed light on, attention, awareness, focus. What are those things in your life that you haven't looked at that are maybe scary? Kids are scared of the dark. Sometimes I'm scared of the dark. If I'm in a home alone and it's dark, that can be scary. So I get it. And we all have the tendency to want to be comfortable and safe. And believe me, I get that. Control, safe, comfortable, known. Yeah, why not? Well, why not? Because it's not the truth. Even if you try to convince yourself, there will always be that part of you that has a bit of fear or a bit of uncertainty, a bit of what if something happens? Well, instead of pretending like it doesn't exist, what if we look it in the eye? And that's what I do with clients all the time too, is anything they're afraid of or worried about or nervous if it's not working or they're unclear, it's like, okay, let's unpack it. Because that's the only way to take a big bad wolf and make it into a friendly puppy dog, I guess. I don't know what that analogy, but to unpack it and make it manageable is to look at it and pick it apart and see what you can do about it. And then know the parts that you can't do anything about. And then it's like, okay, so what do you do with the parts that you can't do anything about? Well, have faith. Okay, well, what's faith? Believing in things unseen. Okay, how should you believe in something unseen? Well, isn't that the thesis of this whole, if this was a paper, I mean, the whole thesis of this is that there are things that are unseen. I'm not telling you what they are. I'm not trying to tell you you have to believe in this and this religion or this and this practice or this God or this story, Jesus. You don't have to believe in any representation per se, but the representations contain wisdom because they're showing you in a story format this exact concept. Faith is belief in things unseen. Belief in things unseen. Well, if there are things that are seen, you know that you look a certain way, your house is a certain way, your car looks a certain way, your partner looks a certain way. Okay. Well, do you believe that there are things that are unseen? Do you believe in the darkness? Do you believe in the parts that are not clear to you yet, that have not been revealed, the next steps in your journey? The future is unseen. So what do you believe about the future? Do you have faith in the future? Do you have faith that things will come to be in the way that they have to be? I mean, or do you believe that things just come as they will? Maybe that's good too, right? Just stay in the present moment. I mean, Buddhism for sure is focused on the present moment, and we get into suffering when we're focused on the future or the past because they're no longer in existence and we only have this present moment. So of course, that's one way to look at it, is to say maximize your life is to focus on the present moment, sure. But even within the present moment, there are things unseen. Again, if we take a scenario, when someone comes to a coaching session and they want to examine a scenario, whether it's their work life or otherwise, their personal life, I've been lately doing a lot of work with relationships. And it's always the case that after a session, we are bringing to surface to life. We're taking things that were in a black box out of their perception or understanding of a situation, whether of themselves or the other person involved, other parties involved. We're taking the black box and we're pulling things out of it to create new awareness out of that black box of things unseen. And so to me, faith is, yeah, there's a lot that I don't understand and a lot that I don't know. And I do believe that things will be revealed to me as they need to be, and that I am on the pursuit of understanding and knowledge to look into that black box. But that black box will always be there of things that I don't know, or under the ocean things that'll always be there. And I have respect for the fact that it'll always be there, just like I have respect for death because I have respect for life. And so I don't take either side of that equation lightly anymore the way I used to. So there's a lot more I could probably do here. Maybe we'll do some other episodes on, I don't know, maybe specifically into the Black Madonna, specifically into Kali, looking into just their history. And I think I kind of was broad on this one, but this episode really goes out to my daughter and all of the children who have died, whether inside of their mothers or not, all of the women that have experienced miscarriage or loss, everyone that's experienced death or suffering through grief of loss and death. I think my heart goes out to you. I feel for you. I have felt that pain. I understand, at least to some degree, even though every experience is so unique, but my heart is with you. And I hope that you can find some peace within the suffering, knowing that it's not for nothing. And that I'm sure you've been reborn to whatever degree. You have certainly been changed by any amount of death you've faced, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a child, a partner, a friend. You're just never the same. So here's to the new you, the reborn you out of the depths of despair and difficulty. And I just wish you so much love and peace as you go through this. And if you're not going through this at the moment, I just thank you for sticking it out and listening to this episode. I know it can feel heavy or dark, and it is heavy and it is dark, but again, while I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, I can't imagine my life going any other way for me to actually hold this in the high regard that I do now. I think if I didn't have such an intense experience, I would have never understood how powerful and potent death and difficulty really is. So I wish you well. I think there's more to say on this, but I hope this is a start, and I hope to see you next time as we consider the discussion, and definitely for the discussion with Robert Greene. I think it'll be one you find interesting. So Thanks for listening, and take care until we meet again.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. It really helps the show when you like, review, subscribe, or donate to support the effort to continue producing amazing episodes just like this one. I look forward to seeing you again in another episode very soon, and take good care until then.